Hey guys, my name is Fear Dragon, and I'm going to be casting the After Hours Gaming League Season 3 League A Facebook versus Amazon match in Division 1. Wow, that's a really long name. But hopefully you guys are tuning in for the right thing, and yeah, if you guys are watching the video, awesome. Again, my name is Fear Dragon. I'm an amateur commentator, and yeah, we're going to go ahead and get this started pretty soon. So just to outline a little bit about what's going to be happening today. So the first game that we're going to be seeing in just a little bit is going to be Amazon's Metzelma TZ versus Radioactive. And that's going to be a Zerg versus Zerg. There's a little bit of an interesting story behind that game, so I'll come to that in a little bit. But after that, we're going to be seeing Zimbaus representing Team Amazon versus Gunslinger representing Team Facebook, and that's going to be a TVP. And after that, we're going to go into game number 3, which is going to be Akayex versus John Oldman with Amazon versus Facebook. Once again, Zerg versus Terran. And the last game, or game number 4, that we know about that we may or may not see is going to be Cicero versus Winkletoss, Amazon versus Facebook, Protoss versus Protoss. And that's only going to come to it if we don't have a 3-0 on either side. And of course, there's also the potential for an ace match where we don't know who the players are going to be. It's just going to be interesting and tons of fun. So yeah, I'm really curious to see if it's going to go to that ace match. I always enjoy when it goes to the ace match just because it's more exciting. There's a lot more on the line. And yeah, with that being said, I think the players are pretty much just getting ready. We're going to again have Metzelma TZ representing Team Amazon versus Radioactive representing Team Facebook. And here's actually the interesting story is Radioactive is actually an ex-Amazon employee, and that also means that he was on AHGL Season 2. He was in Team Amazon, so he knows a little bit about the tricks that Metzelma TZ could play, just because Metzelma TZ, he's not entirely new to the team or by any means. He's actually been with Amazon through Season 2 of AHGL, and we're going to be waiting to see, does Radioactive know what Metzelma TZ is going to be going for? I mean, he might not know specific builds, because obviously this is actually the first season where After Hours Gaming League is going into Heart of the Swarm style games. And with that being said, Radioactive won't really know a whole lot of specific builders, but he might know things about Metzelma TZ's style. And Metzelma TZ actually does have some really cool things in his style. We actually saw him play in the After Hours Gaming League last week against National Instruments, and he actually played a ZVZ over there as well. So what ended up happening is he was playing before on a different map. I cannot remember actually what map, but this game is in fact going to be on Antigua Shipyard, and the game is actually getting started right now. But Metzelma TZ really showing some great micro with the Zergling Banelings, and we're going to have to wait and see. Is he going to be able to do that one more time? With that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump in to the game. Oh yeah, fancy little overlay and everything. And it looks like Metzelma TZ going to be the red Zerg, and Radioactive going to be the blue Zerg. Alrighty, let's get this game started. Spawning down here in the bottom right-hand corner of Antigua Shipyard, we have the blue Zerg representing no team other than Facebook. It is going to be Facebook's Radioactive, an ex-Amazon employee. And his opponent, spawning up here in the top left-hand corner of Antigua Shipyard as the red Zerg player, it is going to be Amazon's representative, and he is going to be Metzelma TZ. And you can see I say Metzelma TZ because there's 1,000,001 ways that you can pronounce this name. I've casted a couple of his games in the past, and I have never decided upon a single name to call him. I've called him Zelma, I've called him Met, I've called him Mats, I've called him Metzelma TZ, and you're just gonna have to go with it. You're just gonna have to go with whatever feels right with him. But one interesting note about this map is it looks like it actually has the gold minerals on this version, so that might come into play a little bit later if this goes into later stages of the game. But I will say, in last week's game of Metzelma TZ versus Radioactive, we actually saw Metzelma TZ go for a bit more of a early gameplay. He decided to go for that Baneling all-in, Zergling Baneling all-in after going for a 14 pool and I think a 15 gas, but it looks like this game, just going to go ahead and plant down that pool around the same time, around 15. Whereas Radioactive actually going for that earlier Gas Geyser. Now, what this earlier Gas Geyser means is that if you plant it a little bit before your spawning pool, you can time it out so that as soon as you put these guys into that Gas Geyser and your spawning pool finishes up, you'll have 100 gas. You can immediately begin that Zergling speed research, which is so important in this matchup. Just because if you're caught out of position with slow Zerglings against Speedlings, you are just infinitely boned. I mean, you have no chance of getting any of those Zerglings out. They're all going to get surrounded and picked off. And it also helps a lot, especially in those engagements with getting the concaves and all that kind of jazz. So we're going to wait and see if that's actually going to come into play. There is going to be a small little timing window where Metzel Matizi will not actually have Zergling speed research, whereas it looks like Radioactive will. As we can see, he now has enough energy or gas for that Speedling research. It looks like he's not actually spending it. There we go. Worrying me for a little bit, just pooling up 20 gas extra, and it looks like we're going to go ahead and see the expansions coming out of both of these players. Now, this is pretty normal play. You might be thinking, oh, Zerg versus Zerg. We're in the beta. It's in the beta of Heart of the Swarm versus Wings of Liberty. Wings of Liberty, Zergs just felt scared to expand. But this isn't that case anymore. It's in Heart of the Swarm, and people have figured out a lot of the ways that you can get into the later stages of Zerg versus Zerg. An interesting note about Zerg versus Zerg and Heart of the Swarm versus Wings of Liberty is that it's kind of the same up until Lair Tech. So you still have that early Zergling openings, you still have a fear of all those Baneling moves, as well as when do you end up getting out Roaches. All of that remains more or less the same. So I'm going to be curious to see how these players decide to play it out. It looks like Radioactive, with having that Zergling speed started, is going to just leave one guy in that Gas Geyser. That's going to allow him to eventually get up a Baneling nest, eventually get up a Roaches and all that kind of stuff, and just kind of react a little bit to how his opponent is playing. Now, we do end up seeing a nice little swarm of Zerglings coming out from Radioactive. We're going to have to wait and see what he does with them. He has about 6 Zerglings out on the map at this point, in comparison to the 8 of Metzel Matizi, and Metzel Matizi actually going for a Spine Crawler. And oh my god, a Baneling already Baneling nest already finished up, and Baneling already morphing in. So this actually might catch Radioactive a little bit off guard right now, as he's going to be running these Zerglings in. They do have speed, whereas Metzel Matizi, as I was saying before, do not have speed. And it looks like a Baneling does hit. It only hits 2 of those Zerglings, and not the greatest hit in the world, but I mean, he will be able to take it. And with that being said, he's going to fend off all of those Zerglings, and Spinecrawler definitely coming in handy. We can see 2 kills already on that Spinecrawler, and additional Banelings morphing. Looks like Metzel Matizi, I mean, it's kind of curious because he has the Spinecrawler, which kind of signifies I want to be on the defensive. But at the same time, he's gone for these very, very early Banelings, and I'm curious to see what he's going to be doing with them. Is he just going to continue to try and drone up very heavily behind all this and say, you know what, you can't go for any kind of Speedling aggression. I'm going to go ahead and just be super defensive, going to get up a lot of Banelings to make sure you can't do anything with those Zerglings, and then I'm going to get up faster Roach Horn or something of the sort. Or is he going to go for some kind of crazy aggression, using that Spine Crawler as a bit of a, safety net? And we'll have to wait and see. We do end up seeing one of those poor little Overlords just falling to the ground. That's a long fall for an Overlord. I don't know if you guys know, but StarCraft is not exactly to scale. And Radioactive, it looks like he's having a little bit of a sad face as he realizes that he's going to be able to pick off a couple of Zerglings, it looks like. In the meanwhile, Radioactive doing a good job keeping that Overlord over here. Just wants to be sure that he sees if Metzel Matizi does decide to move out. And a second Spinecrawler coming out from Metzel Matizi. And in the meanwhile, we have a Lair starting. Oh, wow. This is going to be interesting as, he only has 1 Gas Geyser. Is now just taking that second Gas Geyser that he's going to need now. We'll have to wait and see how many Gas Geysers he ends up taking. It looks like a 3rd does go down. If we have a 4th one, I'm going to have to say, you know what, this is likely going to be some kind of Spire play. But in the meanwhile, we also have all 4 Gas Geysers being taken for Radioactive, and that Spire, that Lair already a lot further in. So, wow, we could actually end up seeing a bit of a Roach and maybe Swarm Host play. That is a possibility. I'm actually not entirely sure about a lot of the Swarm Host builds that could be coming out, but it looks like Radioactive wants to know where his opponent's Lair timing is at, and you can see it just clear and fine as day. And yeah, he's going to know exactly where that's at. And that's going to allow him to react a little bit. Now, we do end up seeing a Spire coming down, so Radioactive just going to be making use of those 4 Gas Geysers. He needs to start putting guys on that 4th Gas Geyser, as he's going to be running a little bit low when you go for Mutalisk. And hopefully it does end up realizing that. Hope that's not a mistake, because that could actually just completely discombobulate your economy. And oh my god, what is this? Looks like a macro hatchery placed over at the natural expansion. That's not something you see every day, but we do end up seeing a ton of Zerglings swarming across the map for Metzel Matizi. They're going to beat the Baneling! Oh my god! The Baneling gets a fantastic hit, and there are not that many Zerglings left over. Just barely enough, maybe, to deal with these Zerglings, but definitely not enough to deal with those Banelings, and it looks like that's going to spell a very, very quick end to Metzel Matizi's ability to put on any aggression, but Metzel Matizi just going to say, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and take my expansion over here. Now, did he actually end up seeing that macro hatchery? Yeah, it looks like he did. So maybe he was just thinking, hey, you're going to go ahead and take a macro hatchery over your natural expansion. I'll just make my macro hatchery at my third, and when I want to start mining there, I can. But we'll have to wait and see. It looks like Radioactive very much on cue to see when exactly that third timing is going down. So Metzel Matizi should be able to clean that up with absolutely no issues. Those two Zerglings, very, very sad Zerglings, but they radioed their message back to their home base, and you know, Radioactive knows about it now. Now we're going to wait and see what exactly is Metzel Matizi going for. Looks like the Spire is going to be finishing up in just a couple of seconds, but his Spire is a bit delayed in comparison to his opponent's, who actually just has 7 Mutalisks on the way. Doesn't have any out just quite yet, but now they are popping, and we're going to keep an eye on these Mutalisks to see how much damage they can do. As you can see, really, Metzel Matizi, just given by the fact of how he's trying to deal with these Overlords, doesn't really have a whole lot of anti-air outside of Justice Queen. So even though he has some Mutalisks on the way, he actually has 9 on the way. That's going to be pretty good for him. Slightly delayed Mutalisks, but he's going to have more of them immediately. But, you know, we're going to have to wait and see. It's going to come down to Micro on how well these Mutalisks are going to be able to deal against each other. It looks like right now Metzel Matizi is starting to lose the Mutalisk battle. He's going to be a little bit careful. A couple of reinforcing Mutalisks coming in for both sides, but it looks like a little bit of miscontrol from Metzel Matizi, and not really getting that other Mutalisk into the battle, and really just having a bit of a misrally, and that's actually not going to be enough, though, for Radioactive, as Radioactive is going to have to retreat. But here come in the Zerglings. Now, are there any Banelings prepared for Metzel Matizi? It looks like there are 3 out on the map somewhere. We're going to have to wait and see where they are, and it looks like now the Zergling on Zergling action while the Mutalisks battle it out in the air. The Banelings actually exploding for, looks like a Metzel Matizi, and Metzel, oh no, Radioactive actually wasting his Banelings on top of the third hatchery, but I'm not sure if it's going to matter, as, yeah, it's just not going to end up going down. It looks like Metzel Matizi just has enough to defend right now, and it can continue to produce additional Zerglings, and with that being said, looks like Radioactive does not feel safe continuing that aggression. We can actually see he is just down about 3 workers, 48 to 51, but of course, the fact is that Metzel Matizi has a much higher Zergling count at this point, 22 Zergling lead, and that's going to allow him to put on a little bit of aggression of his own. It looks like the Mutalisks even picking off a couple of these Overlords. That's going to potentially supply block him, but these Mutalisks from Radioactive are going to be able to do a ton of damage to this. Oh my god, hold that thought. There is actually a hatchery that might go down, and no, it doesn't look like it. The Zerglings are just taking a little bit too much damage from that Glaive Worm bounce from those Mutalisks. In fact, in case you did not know, and you weren't that familiar with StarCraft, I don't know, some of you guys are just cheering on your guys' companies and teams, just tuning in just because you want to cheer them on, but you don't really follow StarCraft that much. Mutalisks actually have an attack that will bounce from one enemy unit to the next, and it'll bounce up to 3 times. Well, not up to 3 times. It bounces 3 times and does a little bit of less damage each time it bounces. But that actually means that against those weak Zergling-like units, it's going to be a lot more effective just because they have so little health that taking even a little bit of health away from those Zerglings is going to be very, very effective. Now, look at what a great job Metzel Matizi is actually doing, clearing up all those Overlords on the map. And in the meanwhile, it looks like he kept most of his Overlords just at home. Where in the world are his Overlords? Looks like here's where the majority of them are. And yeah, they're just going to go ahead and chill out over here. Overlord party could start dropping some creep and really get the party going, but it doesn't look like he's going to opt for that right now. In the meanwhile, let's go ahead and take a look at the Mutalisks count, 14 to 12. So Metzel Matizi looking to be in a pretty good position in this game, just due to how that early game went. But now we end up seeing that Radioactive getting some good shots off on Metzel Matizi's Mutalisks. And ooh, we're going to be seeing a gold expansion attempt from Zelma. And I mean, this is going to be interesting. It's going to come down to whether or not Radioactive decides like he can be aggressive, and it looks like this is actually going to be the case. Does he end up spotting it out? He's just going to leave those Mules over in the center. He's so close. It's right over here. Oh my god, if he can just realize it. And there we end up seeing the Zerglings come in. He's going to have full knowledge of that, and MedZelma is definitely going to have to cancel this. Hopefully he actually gets the cancel in time. Does not get it, and the drone immediately dies, and a very late reaction of all these units. Maybe they're just angry that they just end up losing everything, but the Banelings are about to come in. You can't really see them, but they're about to explode on. Oh no, they actually didn't even need to explode. Looks like they end up taking out all those Zerglings, and oh my god, but it looks like Zelma winning that air battle, especially with all those mules. That's what he has been producing all those mules for, and now he is going to be able to take out all those Banelings that were actually not even utilized during that battle. So really well done by MedZelma TZ, really just knowing how to build the correct unit composition. Radioactive is going to have to come up with some kind of answer. He does have quite a few Spore Crawlers up. He also has that Queen, going to be able to reinforce with some additional Mutals very soon. And he should be able to fend this off. I feel like MedZelma TZ has to be very careful not to overcommit over here. As you can see over here, he's trying to dance and trying to see what damage he can get done. And in the meanwhile, producing additional Mutals. We're going to take a look at the upgrades right now. While this battle is going on, it looks like right now the Radioactive is, I think he can actually win this battle right now. It looks like MedZelma TZ may have overcommitted just a little bit, and yes, he is going to be able to fend him off for now. Looks like no upgrades actually done just quite yet for either of these players, although it looks like MedZelma TZ just finished up his +1 weapons on his Mutalisk, and that's going to be very, very effective, and that's going to be so useful, especially in those Mutalisk versus Mutalisk engagements, as neither of these players really want to transition away from that. We're not seeing any of that Heart of the Swarm-ness action. We're not seeing any of those kind of cool things going on. We're just seeing standard Wings of Liberty, Mutalisk versus Mutalisk, ZVZ. And I mean, I can't really blame these players. It can be a little bit difficult to transition into those Heart of the Swarm units, but hold that thought. We have Radioactive trying to snipe off that gold expansion, but this time MedZelma TZ is a little bit more prepared. He's going to have all those units over there in the jiffy and just ready to actually defend this time, so no worries. And it looks like, oh, actually, here's something that I did not note before. It looks like, actually, Radioactive has been getting really good Zergling upgrades. He is already up to 2 on his melee claws for his Zerglings, whereas MedZelma TZ just sitting on 0-0, and that's kind of going to be saying why, you know, in those past engagements, those Zerglings and that ground force from Radioactive has just been able to completely clean up MedZelma TZ. And, you might be wondering, hey, if he's not winning the air battle, what does it matter? Well, you know, he can still be incredibly effective with these Zerglings. After he ends up cleaning up all the Zerglings of his opponent, he can go ahead and do a counterattack. And it looks like, wow, I think Radioactive actually has a much higher Mutalisk count right now, even though he does not have as quite as good of upgrades. But here we go. Here's what I was talking about. The Zerglings, now that they've won that ground battle, they can go ahead and start doing some nice damage over to the drones over at MedZelma's gold expansion, and that's going to cause so much trouble. He has to be a bit careful, though, with these Mutalisk. He does not want to end up losing them to MedZelma TZ's Mutalisk. And it looks like MedZelma TZ might actually be able to clean up this army from Radioactive. It's going to be very, very close, but no, it looks like just barely 1 or 2 Mutalisks extra, and he was able to do it, and it ends up cleaning off that gold expansion, and that's going to be so annoying for MedZelma, as it looks like, I mean, Radioactive already has that 4th expansion up, and MedZelma is just going to be trying to get that up, and he's going to have a hard time transferring drones over here, especially when his opponent, Radioactive, has control of the map, the entire map. And of course, he's even getting the Carapace upgrades. He's going to have the Carapace upgrades done pretty soon, as well as, what is this? We actually have Renumenize Carapace. That actually allows just Overlord speed. That's going to allow him to maybe get a little bit better scouting, of course, and keep those Overlords alive a little bit longer, maybe against Beetles that are trying to pick them up. But oh no, worst possible situation for MedZelma TZ. Ends up going for the slightly hidden expansion that is a bit further away. He's going to have a hard time defending this, even loses a couple of drones. He's definitely going to end up losing this, even with these Mules coming in. I'm just not sure it's going to be enough. Even, yeah, 3 Zerglings are going to be able to finish off that hatchery, and there we end up seeing the Zerglings taken out by the Broodlings. Broodlings, the ultimate revenge. Their entire existence revolves around revenge, and then they just die after they've gotten revenge. Or if they fail to get revenge, they just give up and die. So, unfortunate for the Broodlings. Fortunate for Radioactive in the whole, though, as he ends up being able to take out that hatchery. And Radioactive is going to keep moving around. This is what I really like when a player has that higher Mutalisk count, they stay super active. They take control of the center of the map, especially on a map like Antigua Shipyard, where it's so hard to move units around the vision of the Xel'Naga Tower. And here we actually end up seeing a couple of those Mutalisks getting picked off, and Radioactive has to be a little bit careful. Does not want to lose too many of these Zerglings. As you can actually see, these, oh my god, with +1 weapons, these Mutalisks are actually going to be able to do a lot of damage to those Zerglings. But now we end up seeing Radioactive is actually a little bit lower on the Mutalisk count. He's going to have to retreat, and he's going to have to be very careful, as he's going to be on a bit of a defensive now. And now I feel like Metzelmatizi should be able to pick off a couple more of those Banelings that are morphing in, as well as these Overlords. Going to maybe even be able to pick off this hatchery in the center. But now we end up seeing a reinforcing wave of those Mutalisks. He's going to be able to defend his base just fine over here. And I feel like Metzelmatizi has to make something happen. He's trying to retake this 4th expansion, but the longer that he waits, the worse of a situation he's going to be in. He's behind in the upgrades on his Zergling units. And I mean, yeah, he has +1 weapons done. He's going to have +2 weapons done, actually, very, very soon for his Mutalisks. But Radioactive is going to be in the same boat, so he's not going to really have a whole lot of advantages. Now we end up seeing this Mutalisk versus Mutalisk battle going on, and of course, as you would expect, Radioactive cleans up on the ground and actually forces a retreat from Metzelmatizi on those Mutalisks. And oh my god, this game is just slowly drifting further and further into Radioactive's I guess, advantage. And, you know, it looks like Metzelmatizi trying to go for a couple of Zergling run-bys, but I don't think he actually managed to kill off a ton. Oh, actually managed to kill off 4 workers. So, yeah, not really the biggest deal over there. And, yeah, with this being said, Metzelmatizi is going to have to try and repopulate this entire expansion with just drones from here. I mean, what's he going to do? Try and transfer drones along this long path? Look at how unsafe this feels. This is very, very painful for a drone to do, especially when there are that massive number of Zerglings and Mutalisks out on the map for your opponent that are occupying the center, have control of that Xel'Naga Tower, constantly moving around. It's going to be so difficult. Now, we do end up seeing the Mutalisks trying to come along over here to the 3rd expansion. He realizes he has to do something. He has to come back in some way, shape, or form. It looks like he's going to have to retreat, as that Spore Crawler is definitely going to give too much of an advantage to Radioactive. Radioactive is chasing with actually only a couple of his Mutalisks. Has to be very careful of those Mutalisks just turn around. You can actually end up doing a lot of damage, but some really good control by Radioactive, pulling those back just in the nick of time. And a couple of Zerglings over here, it looks like they're just kind of scouting around, making sure that Radioactive doesn't grab a 5th expansion. But here we end up seeing Radioactive. He knows about this expansion. He's moving in with a ton of his Zerglings. And in the meanwhile, it looks like the Mutalisk actually from Metzelmatizi going to go ahead and try and do as much damage. But look at this cute little play from Radioactive. Going to be able to burrow all of those drones. But hey, who says that the hatchery itself can burrow? Nobody. And in fact, it actually just gets taken out, and a couple of additional Mutalisks actually get taken out as well. All these Zerglings streaming over to defend against the Mutalisks, the saddest Zerglings in the world. Maybe they're hoping to eat up some of those Glaive Worm bounces, and these Mutalisks actually, they needed to actually be back and defend, but now they're going to be able to take out 2 queens. That's a nice little win over there. But look at this, Metzelmatizi going ahead and moving into that gold expansion to see how much damage he can do. He's doing a pretty good job, honestly, but still, he has to do something a little bit more. He's lost his 4th expansion one too many times, and now it's going to be so difficult. How exactly does he secure that 4th expansion? He does end up having 2 Mutalisks continuing to harass. It looks like they do end up getting a couple more drone kills, but just not enough. We can see, yeah, the 3rd expansion was taken out, but there was a gold expansion up. There is still a 4th expansion up. I mean, it's a 5-base Zerg versus a 3-base Zerg, and the 3-base Zerg is about to run out of minerals at his only mining expansion. Okay, I really don't count this as a mining expansion, guys. And yeah, he has the gas. That's going to be very, very nice. And yeah, he has a nice little mineral bank for now, but what happens when he starts running out of those minerals? He's not even going to have enough minerals to expand very soon. And how does he deal with this giant Zergling army with 3-1 upgrades? He just doesn't have an answer right now. He has to figure out something. He has to either start doing something like maybe producing some corruptors to try and deal with those enemy Mutalisks. I mean, he has a pretty good upgrade count, but here we go. We actually see some Mutalisks from Radioactive. Oh, wow. Actually, 3-0 on the way for those Mutalisks from Radioactive, and they're actually going to be able to take out the spawning pool. That's so painful. Every single bit of this attack actually matters so much, and looks like a Radioactive is just not even going to be able to dealt with it over in the main. He's just going to, Metzelmatizi is just going to see how much damage he can do. He's going to move in with the Mutalisks, going to be able to take out a good number of those Zerglings, but now we end up seeing Radioactive coming back with those Beetles of his own. He's going to see how much damage he can do. It looks like all those Banelings, or a bunch of those Banelings, do get picked off by the Queen, so some nice target fire coming down from Metzelmatizi. But what does he do at this point? He's lost his Spire. What units can Metzelmatizi make? He can make drones and Overlords. And, I mean, he can maybe make some Banelings if he had any Zerglings on the map left. Yeah, it looks like he has 7. That's not going to be enough. And we end up seeing the big and final engagement as it looks like a Radioactive even leading with the upgrades now finally. 0-3 versus 0-2, and Radioactive taking that advantage once again. The Zergling's even going to be moving over into that third, and the Banelings hitting the drones. That is just, you know, super duper painful at this point. Rebuilding a spawning pool at this point, I'm not sure if it's going to be enough. And even though, hey, you do end up cleaning up all of those Mutalisks, and yeah, the Zerglings can't really attack your remaining 4 Mutalisks Metzelma, I feel like your chances in this game are just running a little bit dry at this point. I honestly feel like at this point, Radioactive could just turn all of these guys into Banelings, and there's going to be the GG victory to Radioactive, the Facebook Zerg, and that's going to be the end of game number 1.